What's up, everybody? How are we doing today? It is Tuesday, December 16th, 2025 at 12:48 p.m. Welcome to Sports World Today. It's been a while since I've made one of these. In the last video, I talked about Five Nights at Freddy's, the second movie. Yeah, I'm a sports fan, I'm also nerdy, so I'm gonna have some videos where I talk about movies, talk about nerdy stuff, just how it is. But today we're talking about sports. We're gonna go over a few things today. Yesterday, we began getting the first wave of players who began entering their name into the NCAA transfer portal. Uh, well, week 15 of the NFL season, I believe. Yes, week 15 was last weekend. And as of right now, there are a bunch of teams who have potential to clinch a playoff berth this weekend with a win. So we're going to go over the NFL, we're going to cover college football, as well as whatever it is I can really think of at the moment. But yeah, it is Tuesday, December 16th. It's Sports World Today. So let's get into some news. So obviously, yesterday, the NCAA transfer portal window opened, and we began getting the first wave of players who have begun entering their names into the transfer portal, with a couple of big ones officially entering their name into the portal. We saw DJ Lagway of Florida enter the transfer portal yesterday. Not long after he entered, we saw Dylan Raiola of the Nebraska Cornhuskers enter his name into the transfer portal. Just earlier today, we saw Michigan's backup quarterback Jaden Daniels enter his name into the transfer portal as well. So, we have our waves of players officially entering their names into the transfer portal, and obviously, with what's going on at the University of Michigan right now, we could see a lot more Michigan players entering their name into the transfer portal now that the news about what's happened in Michigan is really beginning to come out even more. And obviously, we'll see a lot more players from other teams start doing that as well. And this will be bigger, especially while Michigan continues to scramble and search for their new head coach. And obviously, this is a big time of the year for transfer portals. This is a big time of the year for teams to get new players and new coaches. Obviously, the playoffs are this weekend. We could see something with Kalen DeBoer if Alabama potentially loses to Oklahoma, with Kalen DeBoer's name being linked often to the Michigan head coaching job since Sharon Moore's dismissal last week. And obviously, we saw Bryce Underwood, Michigan's starting quarterback, the number one recruit of last year's class, taking anything having to do with the University of Michigan out of his social media profile. So I wouldn't be shocked if Bryce Underwood decided that the situation at Michigan is something he doesn't want to be a part of anymore, and therefore entering his name into the transfer portal. Also, with that, Penn State recently found their new head coach, Matt Campbell. This isn't really new news, just something on the side. Now that Penn State has their new head coach, their official guy going into next season, we could potentially see Penn State start to get more players in the portal, since obviously they lost a little bit with the early signing window when they didn't have a head coach secured yet. They have one now, so we could see Penn State be a bit more active. And obviously LSU with Lane Kiffin going in to Baton Rouge and Death Valley. We could see LSU get some players. Obviously, LSU has been linked to a lot of guys who have been entered their name into the transfer portal. So I won't be surprised if LSU was active as well. But obviously, transfer portal is just beginning. A bunch of players are going to be linked to other places. And as far as who the best players are going to be right now, it is obviously going to be Dylan Raiola, in my opinion. The year he had in Nebraska, he definitely excelled with the Cornhuskers as a former five-star recruit. And now, obviously, he's in the portal now. A lot of people are going to go after Raiola. I thought he had a pretty decent year in Nebraska. Obviously, the team didn't do as well as I think some of us thought they would be. But Dylan Raiola, still a former five-star recruit. He has that pedigree. He has a lot of talent and skill there. So he's going to be very sought after as he has now entered his name into the transfer portal. DJ Lagua is another guy. He'll be looking to really rebuild his career after having a bit of a rough season with the Florida Gators last year. And then, obviously, we'll see more players can hit the portal. We'll see a lot more big names being thrown around out there. With this just the beginning of it, as the playoffs continue to go on, I imagine more players are going to be entering the portal, depending on who loses in the playoffs, who has a good playoff. Um, and especially if Michigan gets a new head coach, will Matt Campbell at Penn State be active? And how aggressive is Lane Kiffin going to be at LSU to really try to rebuild this LSU football program who's had a rough couple of seasons? But that is the college football I wanted to talk about. Obviously, let's shift over to the NFL. Last week was NFL Week 15. We saw a lot of big storylines there. Shador Sanders had a very rough game for the Browns. We saw Philip Rivers play his first game since 2021 for the Indianapolis Colts. He has a big game coming up on Monday Night Football for week 16 with the San Francisco 49ers coming in to Indianapolis. We'll talk about that one here in a second, but obviously with week 16 being here, we're getting closer and closer to the playoffs. A lot more teams are in playoff races right now, and a lot of teams have potential to clinch a playoff berth if enough things go their way. This weekend, I'm going to start with the one and ends. And then we'll break it down. Obviously, I think the easiest ones to get out of the way are the Seahawks, are the Eagles, and are the 49ers. I believe the Niners have a chance to get in. But simply put, Seahawks and the Eagles and the Niners all have potential to clinch playoff berth this weekend. Niners, I believe, play host to the Rams. The Eagles play the Commanders, and as I just said, the Niners play the Colts on Monday Night Football. And again, for those teams, it is all very simple. If those teams wins, they will be in. Obviously, they do not have easy tasks ahead of them. Eagles have been struggling over the last few weeks. They play the Commanders. Commanders recently announcing that Jaden Daniels will be out for the remainder of the season. I really don't know why they had him play that one game to begin with, but it is official. Daniels is going to be out for the remainder of the season. So that's obviously a big loss for the Commanders in what's been a really big step back for them, especially the year they had last season. So at the same time, Eagles have been pretty cold. The offense has been sluggish. They haven't had great form recently, so anything can happen there. But yeah, the Eagles win. They are in. Another team is the Seattle Seahawks. We saw the Seahawks and the Rams play each other a few weeks ago, with the Rams getting the better side of it, thanks to Sam Darnold having a really atrocious performance. But this one is in Seattle. A chance for Seattle to get redemption, and chance for Jackson Smith-Njigba to get one step closer to the NFL history books as he continues to chase down the record of 2,000 yards. But once again, for the Seattle, it is simple. Win and you are in. And then last but not least, it is the San Francisco 49ers. Crazy to think that the Niners are in this situation right here, right now, despite the season that they've had, despite not this being a bad season, but the amount of guys they've lost to injury, with Warner and Bosa out for the season, with guys like Purdy, with guys like Kittle being out on IR for multiple stints this year. The fact that they're here right now, where I can say if they win, they're in the playoffs, that's really good for the Niners. So, congratulations to them. This is going to be a really big game for the Colts, who are looking to try to stay in that playoff race, who have been, after being pretty much ice cold these last few weeks. But the Colts looking to stay alive. This is going to be a big test for Philip Rivers. His first home game since coming out of retirement with the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, last time Philip Rivers was playing in Indianapolis, there weren't many fans in the stands. It would be some families of first responders, but then that, a lot of cardboard cutouts. This is different. He's playing at Lucas Oil Stadium, what's going to be a red-hot, jam-packed, very loud Lucas Oil Stadium as the Colts look to try to keep their playoff hopes alive. So this is going to be a big game for Philip Rivers and seeing whether or not they made a mistake trying to bring him out of retirement. But he had some moments last weekend. Obviously, they didn't put a big amount of pressure on him last week. It was a close game. Hard fought till the very end. Seahawks got the win at the end, but wasn't terrible from what I saw from Grandpa Phil. But Colts looking to stay alive. There's a few other teams, but there's a few other teams who could clinch a playoff spot, but a lot of these teams are relying on losses from other teams. I'm just talking about the Eagles, Niners, and the Seahawks because their playoff hopes are as simple as win and you're in. Also, seeing this came out actually yesterday, but Tennessee signee Legend Bay has reportedly requested his letter of release from Tennessee and appears to be heading to Ohio State. He had a big story about him about how his mother basically forced him to sign with Tennessee because she didn't want him to go to Ohio State. Now that he has turned 18, it looks like Legend Bay will be wanting to get out of Tennessee so he can officially be an Ohio State Buckeye. Obviously, the playoffs are this weekend for college football. Let me just check the playoff schedule real quick. Why can't I find it? Gosh dang it. But yeah, this is officially the first week of bowl season. Obviously, we had our first game last weekend with Boise State versus Washington. So we are officially beginning bowl season. First, sorry, it took me a minute to get this. We are, our first playoff game will be on Friday night as the Alabama Crimson Tide go to Oklahoma. And then the Saturday games will be led off by Miami versus Texas A&M, followed by Tulane and Ole Miss, and rounding up the day with James Madison and Oregon. And then again, lots of lots of big storylines could be potentially at stake this weekend. Obviously, I think the biggest question we all have is the future of Kalen DeBoer. We have seen Kalen's name constantly thrown around in this now mix for Michigan's new head coach. He's had some ties to the Midwest before. Obviously, he said his commitment is with Alabama, but if Alabama plays a bad enough game, there isn't really a whole lot that's going to be keeping DeBoer at Alabama, especially knowing how much the fan base has been on DeBoer in the past, thinking he's not the greatest of coaches. Obviously, it has been a very up and down year for Alabama. They started off the season with that two-score loss against Florida State, who ended the year 5-7. That was a bad look for them. Then they had that really solid stretch where they had like I think it was like 4 or 5 consecutive wins against a ranked team, which made put Alabama really back into that big championship contender conversation. And then they lost to Oklahoma in Tuscaloosa. Obviously, that really started their downfall. They played a really close game against Auburn, who also went 5-7, a game that should not have been that close. And now they recently just got their asses handed to them in the SEC championship game by Georgia. I understand they beat Georgia in Athens. That was at the beginning of the season. A lot of things can change from the beginning of the season until now. And obviously, Alabama did not have a good game at all against Georgia. And so that led to us now. Despite the fact of what happened to them in the SEC championship game, they didn't drop in their rankings, and they're in the playoffs. And they play in the first playoff game this Friday at 8 p.m. in Norman, Oklahoma. Now, again, DeBoer has said he's loyal to Alabama. He doesn't plan on leaving unless he gets fired. Well, this is going to be a big statement for Alabama if they can win. If Alabama loses to Oklahoma, they play a bad enough game. We could absolutely see Kalen DeBoer go to Michigan. But that's if Alabama loses. Obviously, I still think this Alabama team is very talented. Their offense has potential to play very well in the postseason. They got Ryan Williams. Ty Simpson's had a bit of an up and down year, but Alabama has the firepower to win a lot of playoff games. It's a matter of whether or not they can do it. Now, they're going against an Oklahoma team. Oklahoma has struggled offensively. They've had their ups and downs this year. Mateer hasn't really exactly been the same guy we saw at the start of the season ever since he came back from that surgery. But Oklahoma is at home. Their defense is strong. They're going to have the Norman crowd behind them. So that's going to be a factor that plays in the game as well. Okay, that's that. And then the second playoff game this weekend is Miami of Florida and Texas A&M. This Texas A&M team had a really great season. They were 11-0. Ultimately, they lost to Texas, which led to them missing the SEC championship game. But this Texas A&M team is loaded against the Miami team who hasn't played well outside of the state of Florida. They've had their ups and downs. A lot of question about whether or not Miami should have made it or Notre Dame. Miami's in it. Yeah, I'm just coming with predictions. But for the first game, give me Oklahoma. I just don't trust Alabama offense playing well, especially knowing how well they've played. So I'm gonna go Oklahoma in the first game. Second game, give me Texas A&M. Last time Miami went to the state of Florida, they lost pretty bad to SMU, who didn't have the greatest season this year. But Miami has talent, but not as good as Marcel Reed in that Texas A&M offense, who's played really well. Mike Elko just got a really big extension to keep him around at College Station. So I'm gonna go A&M gets a big win at home. Tulane versus Ole Miss. Congrats to Tulane for making it. This is why they need to change the playoff format or who gets in, because there's absolutely no way Tulane should be in the playoffs. But it's gonna be Ole Miss. Congrats to Tulane for making it, but too much firepower for the Ole Miss Rebels. Give me Ole Miss. In the last game of the day, obviously Oregon, I believe, is much more talented in basically every other aspect. Had they not lost to Indiana, they probably would have been the ones playing Ohio State for the Big Ten championship, and there's an outcome. They probably could have won the Big Ten championship. They didn't. I think people are kind of looking down on Oregon because they weren't as good as they were last year, but this is still a very talented Oregon team led by Dan Lanning, led by Dante Moore, who's had a really good bounce back season after a couple rough years at UCLA, and really playing back up last year to Dylan Gabriel. But people are thinking that James Madison could potentially pull off the upset. Personally, once again, kudos to James Madison for making it. I just don't see the upset happening. I think Oregon wins, and Oregon makes the quarterfinals. But those are my predictions for the games this weekend. Obviously, anything could happen. Tulane and James Madison are going to be motivated by the fact that they have never been in this situation before. They're here for the first time, and they want to make a statement to say that they do deserve to make it, deserve to be here, despite the fact that they faced a lot of controversy for being here, and the fact that they beat teams like Notre Dame, Texas, BYU, Vanderbilt, who are much more talented teams from Power Four conferences. So they're going to be motivated, but at the end of the day, Ole Miss and Oregon, in my opinion, have way too much firepower and way too much talent to lose these games, especially that they are at home. And especially knowing the fact that Ole Miss has already beaten Tulane by like 4 or 5 scores this year. Yeah, those are my predictions for what those college football playoff games are going to look like round one this weekend, once again, starting with Alabama and Oklahoma on Friday. And on the Saturday games, A&M versus Miami at noon, Ole Miss versus Tulane at 3:30, and ending up the night with Oregon versus James Madison at 7:30. It's officially bowl season is here and getting underway. Second bowl game of the year is tonight. It's Troy versus Jackson State, and we will go from there. Obviously, you can see him on this side right here. Let me grab him real quick. Hang on. Let's go by. Go Bobcats. We play UNLV next Tuesday. We're going to win, obviously. But yeah, this is going to be an exciting playoff, and I'm really looking forward to it. And obviously, the NFL season is quickly approaching its end as well. We're getting close to the playoffs in the NFL, which will be great. And baseball offseason is in full swing of things. So I'll report more news about that as well. But yeah. Let's make sure I'm not missing out on anything. Which I don't think I am. Oh, Arch Manning's come back to Texas. I don't think that's much of a surprise to anybody, especially knowing that he had the best season. But yeah, that's gonna be it for this episode. Thank you for tuning in. Um, I was gonna save my playoff predictions for college football for another video, but you know, I just gave them away. So I'll try to make a video talking about WWE soon, talking about what happened with John Cena's retirement and how it sucked, at least the way match went. The future WWE as well. It's looking a little iffy right now. And then obviously I'll probably make a bigger deep dive video into how teams can make the playoffs in the NFL. But those are all future times. Thank you guys for joining me this weekend, and I will see you around. Thank you for joining me.